a champion, undefeated and untouchable, once hailed as a national hero. But when war engulfed his homeland, silence was his only response. From celebrated icon to political outcast, his fall was as sudden as it was shocking. Why did the man who conquered it all retreat from the country that made him? Was it strategic silence or a betrayal in the face of war? The truth behind his silence will leave you questioning everything. Khabib Nurmagomedov, one of the most dominant UFC champions in history, once held a revered status in his homeland, Russia. His rise to stardom transcended sport, becoming a symbol of national pride. Yet, as quickly as he rose, Khabib's public image plummeted, leaving many to question how a national hero turned into a political outcast. What led Khabib, once a favorite of President Vladimir Putin and the Russian people, to flee his country and distance himself from his past? To understand the trajectory of Khabib's fall from grace, one must revisit the early years of his career, which was marked by national pride and political harmony. In 2018, after an overwhelming victory over Conor McGregor, Khabib became a household name not only in the UFC but also in Russia. He was celebrated as a sports hero and a symbol of strength, embodying the ideals of a proud Russian nation. His relationship with President Vladimir Putin solidified his status as a powerful figure in the country. The turning point came in 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine. What followed was a political and social shift that turned the country into a battleground not just for territory but also for ideological control. Celebrities and public figures, once free to express their opinions, were now pressured to publicly support the government's actions or risk losing their status. Khabib, who had long been seen as a national icon, found himself in a precarious position. While Russia's government looked to enlist its public figures to rally support for the war, Khabib remained silent. His refusal to make a public statement on the ongoing conflict in Ukraine was seen as a betrayal by the Russian government, who expected unwavering loyalty from their most influential celebrities. The silence, initially viewed as neutral, soon became a source of anger among both the government and the people of Dagestan, his home region. Khabib's silence marked a dramatic shift in his relationship with the Russian government and the people of Dagestan. Once celebrated as a national hero, Khabib now found himself under intense scrutiny. The government's discontent with Khabib's inaction was swift and punitive. Khabib was hit with massive tax claims, the seizure of his assets, and public backlash. His failure to support the war effort led to a complete transformation in how the public viewed him. He was no longer seen as the beloved champion, but as a man who had abandoned his country during a time of crisis. The people of Dagestan, once his strongest supporters, felt deeply betrayed by Khabib, with protests erupting across the region, especially among the women who protested against the forced conscription of men into the military. Many turned to Khabib, expecting him to use his influence to speak out against the mobilization. But when he failed to do so, public opinion turned sharply against him. Fans and fellow fighters who once admired him now questioned his loyalty to his homeland, and Khabib faced enormous challenges in this period of public backlash. His silence on the war, along with his growing estrangement from his homeland, left him vulnerable to attacks from both sides. Russian propagandists and TV hosts criticized him publicly, accusing him of betraying his country. The authorities also launched an aggressive campaign against him, seizing his assets and businesses, including his family home in Dagestan and his car collection. Amid the challenges, Khabib continued to enjoy respect and adoration in the Muslim world, particularly in the UAE. His faith and values resonated strongly with his new audience, providing him with an unexpected haven. Although he was facing turmoil in Russia, Khabib's status in the broader Muslim community remained largely untarnished. This support from the Middle East allowed him to secure citizenship in the UAE, offering him a way out of the turmoil in Russia. As Khabib found refuge in the UAE, the situation in Russia continued to escalate. The Russian government began to tighten its grip on dissent, and Khabib, once a prominent voice for his people, found himself caught in the middle of a political maelstrom. His decision to stay silent on the war led to mounting pressure from both the Russian government and his own people. Despite the mounting tension, Khabib's efforts to maintain his silence were met with harsh consequences. His assets were seized, and his businesses in Russia were shuttered. The Russian government made an example of Khabib, showing that even a national hero was not immune to punishment if they failed to toe the line. Khabib's silence, while perhaps well-intentioned, only added fuel to the fire, leaving him isolated from both the Russian government and the people of Dagestan. Khabib's silence finally came to a head when Russian officials accused him of tax evasion, claiming he owed millions in unpaid taxes. This event marked the official collapse of Khabib's relationship with the Russian government. The tax claims were accompanied by the seizure of his assets, including properties worth millions of rubles. It became clear that Khabib's failure to support the government had turned him into an enemy of the state. The aftermath of this event was chaotic for Khabib. He faced legal action, and his family's home was taken from them. The once celebrated hero of Dagestan was now being treated as a criminal, forced to navigate a maze of legal battles and mounting public criticism. The confusion over his stance on the war only added to the chaos, as both sides began to view him as a symbol of disobedience. In the end, Khabib made the difficult decision to leave Russia. The UAE offered him a new home, and he was granted citizenship, securing his safety and freedom. However, the damage to his reputation in Russia was irreversible. Once seen as a hero, Khabib was now an outcast, forced to rebuild his life in a foreign land. Khabib's departure from Russia marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. In the days following his move to the UAE, Khabib continued to maintain a low profile. He refrained from making public statements about the war in Ukraine or his reasons for leaving Russia, opting instead to focus on his business ventures and personal life in the UAE. His silence on the war remained a point of contention, with critics accusing him of avoiding the issue rather than confronting it. Khabib's legacy as a champion remains intact in the world of MMA, but his political and personal legacy in Russia is forever tainted. His refusal to take a clear stance on the war in Ukraine led to a loss of support from his homeland, and his relationship with the Russian government has been permanently damaged. Khabib's story serves as a cautionary tale about the personal costs of political silence in a world where allegiances are demanded and loyalty is tested. Khabib's legal troubles in Russia, including the tax claims and asset seizures, were a direct result of his failure to support the war. The ethical implications of his silence are still debated, with some arguing that Khabib had a moral obligation to speak out against the war, while others believe that he should have been allowed to remain neutral. The Russian government's punitive actions against Khabib also raised questions about the extent to which political dissent is tolerated in the country. Khabib remains a respected figure in the world of MMA and continues to enjoy a significant following in the Muslim world. His record as an undefeated champion speaks for itself, and his impact on the sport cannot be denied. However, his political legacy is far more complicated. His silence on the war in Ukraine and his eventual departure from Russia have left a lasting mark on his reputation, particularly among his fellow countrymen. Khabib's story has had a ripple effect on the relationship between athletes and political regimes. His experience highlights the delicate balance athletes must navigate when their fame intersects with politics. It also serves as a reminder of the consequences that can arise when public figures fail to take a stand on major issues. Khabib's rise to fame was swift, and his fall from grace just as dramatic. His journey from national hero to outcast reflects the complex intersection of sports and politics. His silence on the war in Ukraine and his eventual departure from Russia changed the course of his life, forever altering how he is remembered by the public. Khabib's legacy as a fighter is secure, but his political legacy remains a point of contention. His story will continue to resonate in the world of sports and politics, serving as a cautionary tale for athletes caught in the crossfire of geopolitical conflicts. As Khabib moves forward with his life in the UAE, his story serves as a reminder of the pressures faced by public figures in politically charged environments. His silence, while initially seen as a neutral stance, ultimately led to consequences that reshaped his life and career. Whether Khabib will ever return to Russia or make a public statement about the war remains uncertain, but his story is far from over. What if I told you that an MMA fighter could indulge in junk food every single day, yet still dominate his opponents in the cage?
More volume. He needs to be landing in combinations.
Sounds impossible, right? But that's exactly what happened with Salt Papi, who went from struggling in the Philippines to dominating YouTube boxing arenas, racking up millions of followers and earning the respect of boxing legends. Didn't just wake up one day to fame. Salt Papi's rise to prominence is one of dedication, passion, and sheer willpower. But before he became the face of viral dance moves and knockout punches, he was just Nathaniel Bustamante, a young boy inspired by none other than Filipino boxing legend Manny Pacquiao.
Never fails to surprise me with what he brings to the table. It's always a little better than I thought. Oh, my God!
Growing up in the Philippines, Salt Papi had dreams, and like many kids in his country, boxing was one of them. His idol was Pacquiao, the boxing icon who made history. As a child, Nathaniel would mimic Pacquiao's moves in his backyard, dreaming of the day he'd step into the ring himself. But life in the Philippines wasn't easy. Financial struggles were a constant reality for his family, and access to boxing gyms was limited. School wasn't much easier either, as Salt Papi had to face bullying regularly, fueling his anger and pushing him into frequent fights. These early battles shaped his resilience and fueled his desire to prove himself, not just in the ring, but in life. Determined to defend himself and rise above his circumstances, Nathaniel trained in boxing, learning the ropes on his own, driven by the need to overcome his personal battles. His early years were marked by sacrifice and self-discipline, and at the age of 13, his family made the life-changing decision to move to the UK in search of better opportunities. But Nathaniel didn't immediately find his calling in the sport. Instead, he began a career in nursing, helping others. But deep down, his passion for boxing never waned. It wasn't long before Salt Papi's unique brand of content on TikTok caught fire. His dance videos gained traction, and soon enough, millions of fans were watching his every move. But dancing was just the beginning. Salt Papi's love for boxing reignited, and in February 2022, he was set to make his mark in the ring. On March 5, 2022, Salt Papi faced British YouTuber Halal Ham in a highly anticipated match at the SSE Arena in London. Months of preparation led to this, and as the bell rang, the two fighters went toe-to-toe.
Salt Papi in the red, Halal Ham in the blue. Ooh. And Halal came straight out but got caught.
Despite the hype, it was clear who the real fighter was. Salt Papi dominated Halal Ham, winning the match by unanimous decision.
Salt Papi!
But Salt Papi wasn't done yet. His next challenge came when he faced Canadian Twitch streamer Andy Worski in a fight that left everyone speechless. From the first round, the crowd erupted as Salt Papi's fists did the talking. His victory came in record time, solidifying his place in YouTube boxing history. The internet buzzed, and Salt Papi was becoming more than just a viral sensation. He was a real force in the boxing world.
Pride of the Philippines, Super!
In December 2022, another announcement took the boxing world by surprise. Salt Papi would face American MMA fighter Josh Bruner on the undercard of KSI vs. FaZe Temper at the Grand Wembley Arena in London on January 14, 2023. The atmosphere was electric as both fighters went to war, leaving the fans on the edge of their seats. Salt Papi's victory was hard-earned, showcasing his strength and unwavering determination. Salt Papi's journey has been a mix of triumphs and challenges. From his early influences, including his idol Manny Pacquiao, to his rise as a YouTube boxing sensation, his path hasn't been easy, but it's been filled with passion. The respect from boxing legends like Chris Eubank Jr. and Pacquiao himself proves just how far Salt Papi has come. Pacquiao's invitation to have Salt Papi as his co-main event was a massive milestone, marking Salt Papi's rising status in the world of boxing. But as Salt Papi's star rose, so did the competition. On April 14, 2023, Salt Papi was set to return to the ring, this time facing MMA fighter Anthony Pretty Boy Taylor on May 13, 2023. It was a highly anticipated matchup, but Salt Papi's rhythm was off. After a valiant effort, the judges awarded Anthony Taylor a unanimous decision victory. But despite the loss, Salt Papi's story is far from over. In boxing, victories and defeats are part of the journey, but Salt Papi's story reminds us that a fighter's heart burns brightest in the face of adversity. Even in defeat, he remains determined to conquer new challenges and keep pushing forward. His journey is a testament to the power of resilience and passion, qualities that have defined his rise in both social media and boxing. From being a young boy inspired by Manny Pacquiao to a rising star in the boxing world, Salt Papi's story continues to inspire. In the fast-paced world of YouTube boxing, where unexpected matchups can lead to astonishing results, Salt Papi is more than just a viral sensation. He's proving that with the right mix of dedication, passion, and a little bit of swagger, anything is possible. And as for the future, well, there's no stopping this rising star, and we can't wait to see what comes next. Tony Ferguson has made a remarkable return to the ring, proving that even in the latter stages of his career, he remains a force to be reckoned with. In a fight where many counted him out, Ferguson demonstrated an impressive array of skills, securing a third-round TKO victory over Salt Papi. The win highlighted Ferguson's refined boxing techniques, which were built on his signature pressure, cardio, and reach. One of Ferguson's most impressive assets in this fight was his ability to utilize his reach effectively. Despite Salt Papi's explosive style, which relies on rapid offensive bursts, Ferguson systematically wore him down through consistent pressure. Poppy's attempts to land powerful left hands were thwarted by Ferguson's superior distance control. By maintaining control over the range and closing the distance at the right moments, Ferguson neutralized Poppy's power shots. Ferguson's strategy was clear. He used his jab and superior reach to prevent Poppy from landing clean strikes, forcing him into uncomfortable positions and dictating the pace of the fight. As the rounds progressed, Poppy's energy depleted rapidly, a direct consequence of trying to land his shots while Ferguson kept his composure and continued his relentless pursuit. Notable in this performance was Ferguson's improvement in defense. Traditionally known for his unorthodox and sometimes reckless style, Ferguson showcased more fundamental defensive skills, an adjustment likely made to adapt to the nuances of boxing. He displayed better head movement, rolling with punches, and keeping his chin down, skills rarely seen in his MMA career. This was particularly important, as boxing, unlike MMA, places greater emphasis on technical defense. Throughout the fight, Ferguson was able to absorb several of Poppy's power shots that might have previously floored him in MMA. A key moment came when Poppy landed a clean left haymaker to Ferguson's chin, a punch that, under different circumstances, might have been a knockout blow. However, Ferguson took the hit in stride, absorbing the damage and continuing to press forward. His ability to withstand these punches highlighted a potential resurgence in his resilience, even as he ages. While Poppy's explosive movements were initially effective in the early exchanges, they quickly became a liability. His constant springing forward, relying heavily on his left hand, drained his energy, and Ferguson capitalized on this by maintaining a steady pace. Poppy's shots lacked the consistency required to maintain a sustained threat, and his attempts to counter Ferguson were often ineffective. One of the key tactical elements of the fight was Ferguson's ability to force Poppy into defensive positions. Poppy, despite his agility and offensive bursts, struggled to deal with Ferguson's pressure. A prime example came when Poppy attempted to retaliate with a left hook. Ferguson expertly slipped the shot and countered with a sharp right hand to the body, followed by another jab to the face. The combination of offense and defense proved overwhelming for Poppy, who began to lose his rhythm as the fight progressed. By the second round, the momentum had clearly shifted in Ferguson's favor. After controlling the first round with consistent jabs and body shots, Ferguson's confidence grew. He began to push Poppy back with a series of powerful jabs and counters, forcing Poppy into the corner and maintaining the fight's tempo. When Poppy tried to retaliate, Ferguson was quick to slip and roll, showcasing his improved head movement and defensive positioning. An important moment came when Poppy's lack of defensive response to Ferguson's pressure became apparent. Poppy, who had been on the back foot for much of the second round, failed to react appropriately to Ferguson's offensive onslaught, leading to multiple flush shots landing. The lack of respect from Poppy towards Ferguson's boxing fundamentals allowed the latter to dominate the pace and distance, proving that experience and fight IQ can often outweigh raw power. Ferguson's win over Poppy was not just a victory in the ring, it was a statement. The once unpredictable, unorthodox fighter had honed his skills to match the technical demands of boxing. While it would be premature to call this a return to his prime, Ferguson's performance in this bout suggests that he still has much to offer the sport. The fight itself showcased Ferguson's growth as a boxer, particularly in terms of defense and controlling the ring. His ability to manage distance, absorb punishment, and maintain relentless pressure throughout the contest allowed him to break Poppy's will and secure a TKO win. However, one must note that Poppy, despite his explosive style, did not provide the same level of challenge that other elite boxers would. Tony Ferguson's potential future in boxing looks promising, but he must face more seasoned opponents to truly assess his capability in this new arena. Nonetheless, this victory is an encouraging sign that Ferguson, even in the later stages of his career, remains a dangerous and unpredictable force in combat sports. From battling through pain no one can see,
Flyweight Division Championship, and now Joshua Marsh from Brentwood, New York, and by way of Long Island MMA, comes into Memphis.
to stepping into a cage where the odds were stacked against them from the start. Some of these stories aren't just inspirational, they're downright unbelievable. Today, we're looking back at the most relentless, mind-bending, and unforgettable MMA fighters who didn't just face opponents, they fought against their own bodies, and in some cases, even the world itself. And trust me, you're not ready for what's coming next. Starting with someone who was told he would never walk, but instead chose to run straight into the cage and take on the world. Zion Clark, the underdog with 0 legs. If you thought it was impossible to fight without legs, think again. Zion Clark's story is nothing short of a miracle. Born with caudal regression syndrome, Zion was told he'd never walk, let alone fight. But he stepped into the cage in 2022 and took Eugene Murray to the mat with his wrestling background, securing a unanimous decision victory. And just when you think that's impressive, hold up. His real goal?
Zion Clark, he was training for the Paralympics. Now the PB resident's using his strength to foster a cause very close to him.
The Olympics and Paralympics. This isn't just a fighter who wants to compete. He wants to dominate on the world stage with no legs to hold him back. But wait, if you think Zion's fight against his body was the hardest thing he's done, just wait until you hear about Matt Hamill. Matt Hamill, the deaf champion who outlasted his own demons. Born deaf, Matt Hamill didn't just hear the challenges ahead, he silenced them. A three-time NCAA champion, Hamill stepped into the Ultimate Fighter and faced off against John Jones in 2009. And when Jones threw illegal downward elbows,
He's doing a good job. Big elbows. No.
it was Hamill who was awarded the win, though the victory didn't feel right.
Defend with one arm, but I tried to defend it. I knew.
But just when you think that was the craziest part of his career, let's talk about his exit. Retiring in 2013 to focus on advocating for deaf athletes, Matt wasn't just fighting in the cage, he was fighting for a cause that transcended sports. Now, let's shift gears and talk about Shay Taylor. His comeback wasn't about being a champion, it was about survival. Shay Taylor, prosthetic warrior who gave it all for a fight. Shay Taylor's motorcycle accident didn't just take his leg, it sparked a transformation. After months of recovery, Shay returned to the cage with a prosthetic leg, ready to show the world that nothing, not even a life-altering accident, could stop him. He fought Elvis Cruz at Wild Bill's Fight Night, where he was submitted by armbar. But the admiration for his skills and determination was unmatched. And when you think his story can't get more intense, consider this. Shay didn't just fight for himself. He fought to redefine what it means to be a warrior, prosthetic leg and all. Now, from Shay's rebirth in the cage, let's jump to a one-armed dynamo who took the world by storm. Nick Newell, the one-armed submissions king. Nick Newell didn't just enter the world of MMA with one arm, he owned it. Born without a left forearm, Nick's record stood at an impressive 16-4. With a reputation for submission victories that had fans asking, how is this even possible?
Notorious Nick.
He fought at Bellator, earning respect with every fight, including his split decision loss to Bobby King in 2021, a fight that proved Nick was as dangerous as ever. But just when you think a one-armed fighter is impressive enough, let's talk about Garrett Holev. His story goes beyond inspiration. It pushes the very limits of what the world thought possible. Garrett Holev, Down syndrome, big dreams. Garrett Holev's journey is a story of defiance against not only physical limitations, but societal expectations. Born with Down syndrome and rheumatoid arthritis, Garrett made history when he stepped into the cage for an amateur bout in 2013. While critics debated the ethics of allowing someone with Down syndrome to fight, Garrett didn't care about the rules. He cared about proving he could. And just when you think Garrett's story can't be more powerful, there's the truth. His fight wasn't about winning or losing, it was about rewriting the playbook for people with disabilities, showing the world that they too deserve to fight. From Garrett's defiance, let's move to someone whose body had no arms, no legs, but everything else. Kyle Maynard, the quadruple amputee who refused to quit. If you thought Zion Clark's legs or Nick Newell's one arm were tough, wait until you hear about Kyle Maynard. Born without arms and legs, Kyle's only MMA fight came at Auburn Fight Night in 2009. He fought Brian Fry, who defeated him by unanimous decision, but the real fight was against life itself. Kyle wasn't fighting for glory, he was fighting for his own survival, proving that the human spirit is the ultimate weapon. But here's where things get interesting. Kyle's story wasn't just about fighting, it was about redefining humanity, about showing that even without limbs, a fighter is still a fighter. Next, let's move on to Matt Betzold, a man whose battle didn't start in the cage. It started when he was just 6 years old. Matt Betzold, grappler with a battle-hardened past. Matt Betzold's fight began long before he ever stepped into an MMA cage. After poisoning from poisonous mushrooms led to the amputation of his leg at just 6 years old, Matt grew up determined to make his mark on the world. He became the first amputee MMA fighter, known for his unique grappling style.
3 minutes to go in the bout.
His most notable bout came against Brandon Moreno in 2015, but it's his story of perseverance, not victories, that defines him. Just when you think that's the most impressive part of Matt's journey, think again. His life wasn't just about the fights. It was about showing the world that no matter what life throws at you, you can still fight back. And now, speaking of the ultimate underdog, let's talk about Shay Taylor's second chance at life in the cage. Shay Taylor, back again, prosthetic leg and all. Shay's return to the cage wasn't just a fight for victory, it was a fight for redemption. After losing his leg, Shay wasn't just looking to prove himself in MMA, he was looking to redefine what it meant to be a fighter. His performance at Wild Bill's Fight Night 44 was full of raw power, even though he was ultimately submitted by armbar. But it wasn't just about winning, it was about returning to the fight after everything that tried to take him down. So, if you thought Shea Taylor's story was inspiring, just wait until you hear Kyle Maynard's undying spirit. Kyle Maynard, the ultimate underdog. Kyle Maynard's story isn't about a loss, it's about what happens when you fight without limits. His only MMA appearance ended with a loss, but his battle wasn't with Brian Fry. His battle was with the world that doubted him. Kyle's fight wasn't just for victory, it was to show everyone that strength isn't about having limbs, it's about having heart. Kyle Maynard's journey wasn't defined by his loss, it was defined by his refusal to be anything less than a fighter. These fighters didn't just step into the cage to fight.
Oh, Cody Russell.
They stepped into the cage to redefine the limits of human will. Each one of them turned adversity into their greatest strength, proving that the true battle isn't just against your opponent, but against everything the world says you can't do. Their stories aren't just about winning, they're about showing the world that nothing, not even the most crippling disabilities, can stop the human spirit from rising to the challenge. These are legends, and they will not be forgotten.
The best heavyweights in the world.
In the aftermath of Tom Aspinall's eye poke incident, the online conversation surrounding his decision not to continue,
guys, I just poked knuckle deep in the eyeball. What are you doing?
Took on a life of its own. What began as an injury-related stoppage quickly evolved into a narrative war, one driven by misinformation, emotional reactions, and, possibly, coordinated influence from within the MMA ecosystem.
It was an illegal technique, an eye poke, so you have to cut him some slack.
The criticism directed at Aspinall did not appear in isolation. It arrived in waves, each echoing similar sentiments, that he quit, that he should have fought on, and that his injury was being exaggerated. The rapid spread of these claims raised important questions about how narratives form in combat sports, and how fighters can become targets of broader political dynamics within the UFC. The backlash against Tom Aspinall exposed a much deeper issue at the heart of modern MMA, the expectation that fighters should fight through anything, legal or illegal, in the name of toughness. For years, fans have idolized stories of athletes who pushed beyond injury, ignored pain, and overcame adversity inside the cage. This mythology has shaped the sport's identity, presenting fighters as almost superhuman figures capable of enduring punishment that would break ordinary people. But the same mythology that elevates these athletes also places an unrealistic burden on them. When a fighter chooses safety over reckless bravery, that decision is often framed not as wisdom, but as weakness. This mindset has warped how fans respond to illegal fouls. Eye pokes, groin strikes, glove grabs, moves that should result in immediate caution, are frequently minimized or dismissed as minor inconveniences. The common refrain is that fighters should fight through it, regardless of the severity of the injury or the intent behind it. Yet eye injuries in particular are among the most dangerous in all of combat sports. They can cause temporary blindness, corneal abrasions, retinal damage, migraines, depth perception issues, and light sensitivity. And in Tom Aspinall's case, the injury was not just a poke, it was a compression injury, where the force drives the eye backward into the socket. These injuries often show little external redness, but can be significantly more serious internally. The assumption that fighters can simply blink it out reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of what these injuries entail. Despite that, fans often point to rare examples of fighters who continued after being fouled as evidence that Aspinall should have done the same. Names like Michael Bisping, Anthony Smith, and Waldo Cortez Acosta are frequently invoked, but these examples are the exception, not the rule. Bisping continued fighting, but permanently lost sight in one eye, a sacrifice that haunted the rest of his career. Anthony Smith fought through severe damage and later acknowledged it cost him future title opportunities. Waldo Cortez Acosta may have continued and won, but that fight included irregular procedures, chaotic restarts, and a momentum shift that benefited him, a situation entirely different from Aspinall's. Using these isolated cases to shame another fighter not only ignores context but weaponizes survivorship in a way that is neither fair nor medically responsible. Context is especially important when comparing situations like Acosta's to Aspinall's. In Acosta's case, the referee did not handle the stoppage correctly. The action continued for longer than it should have. Teams and officials entered the cage prematurely, and Acosta was given time and space that unintentionally worked in his favor. The fight eventually restarted under unusual circumstances, and Acosta capitalized on the shift in momentum. None of this resembles what happened to Tom Aspinall, whose injury occurred cleanly, decisively, and without mishandling from officials. Yet these distinctions are often ignored in favor of the simpler narrative: someone else fought through it, so Tom should have too. This leads to a larger question about ethics in MMA. What responsibility do fighters have to risk long-term health for short-term entertainment? When fans say, "He should have continued," they are often speaking from emotion, not understanding. What they are truly asking is for a fighter to jeopardize his eyesight for the sake of completing a round. In a sport already known for its brutality, expecting an athlete to fight blind after an illegal foul stretches the boundaries of what should be considered acceptable. The rules are in place to protect fighters, but the culture often pushes them to ignore those protections in favor of proving their toughness. Ultimately, Aspinall's decision not to continue was not a sign of weakness, but a rational response to a dangerous, illegal strike. His choice reflects what the sport should encourage: prioritizing safety, following medical advice, and not allowing a foul to create pressure to continue at all costs. The outrage that followed revealed more about fan expectations and the culture of the sport than it did about Tom Aspinall himself, and in that sense, the incident became a mirror, reflecting back the uncomfortable truth that MMA still has a long way to go in balancing spectacle with athlete safety. Dana White's early comments, particularly the phrase "no damage," played a significant role in shaping public perception. Without clarification, the remark was interpreted by many as an attempt to downplay the injury or challenge Aspinall's toughness. In a sport where fighters depend heavily on their promoters' public support, even ambiguous statements can take on outsized meaning. The UFC's communication strategy often relies on controlled messaging. When that messaging is unclear, it leaves space for speculation. In this case, it created an opening for critics and commentators to push a competing narrative, one that cast doubt on Aspinall's decision and his motivations. In the days following the incident, several prominent figures, Quinton Jackson, TJ Dillashaw, Chael Sonnen, Dustin Poirier, Aljamain Sterling, and Waldo Cortez Acosta, voiced skepticism toward Aspinall's injury or criticized his choice not to continue. Individually, such opinions could be dismissed as personal viewpoints. Collectively, however, the pattern raised eyebrows. All of these fighters are represented by Arsenal Sports Agency, led by longtime Dana White associate Tiki Gosin. While it is impossible to prove coordinated messaging, the alignment of perspectives across this group is notable. Their combined influence helps solidify the narrative that Aspinall quit, regardless of medical evidence or precedent. Some statements were strikingly out of character. Dustin Poirier, for example, rarely posts reaction videos, yet recorded one mid-flight, clearly under the influence. Aljamain Sterling, whose own championship reign included a medically justified decision not to continue after an illegal strike, questioned the severity of Aspinall's injury. Each of these reactions contributed to the perception of a unified front against Aspinall. The word quit carries a strong stigma in MMA. It is often associated with giving up, surrendering, or lacking courage. Yet by its literal definition, to quit simply means to stop in action. Viewed through that lens, yes, Aspinall did stop fighting. But he did so for legitimate medical reasons, following an illegal foul that threatened his long-term health. The problem lies not in the action, but in the connotation. In MMA culture, quitting is treated as a moral failure, even when it is the correct and rational choice. Few critics acknowledge that continuing through such injuries often leads to severe consequences. Anthony Smith, one of the only fighters to experience a similar situation firsthand, continued through damage during a title fight, and later conceded that the decision derailed his championship aspirations entirely. The speed and intensity with which the Aspinall quit narrative spread reflects a larger reality in MMA. Narratives are shaped not only by facts but by influence. The UFC's promotional needs, management alliances, and fighter loyalties can subtly, or overtly, guide public opinion. Whether intentional or not, the voices criticizing Aspinall helped deflect attention from the illegal foul and redirected scrutiny onto the victim. It is a dynamic that has occurred before in UFC history, often surrounding fighters who find themselves at odds with promotional priorities. As the sport evolves and media becomes more decentralized, these narrative battles grow more complex. Fighters now face scrutiny not just from promoters and journalists, but from fans, influencers, and former champions, many of whom have their own agendas, alliances, or financial incentives. As the build-up to the eventual rematch unfolds, it is important to remember how quickly narratives can be shaped and weaponized. The conversation surrounding Tom Aspinall has already been influenced by misinformation, emotional reactions, and potential political pressure. The question moving forward is not simply whether Aspinall will regain his title momentum, but how the sport will treat athletes who choose safety and long-term health over short-term spectacle. Because the stakes extend beyond Tom Aspinall. They speak to a broader issue at the heart of MMA. Who gets to control the story, and at what cost to the fighters themselves? That wraps up this video. For more interesting videos like this, check out the cards on your screen.
What if I told you that while most MMA fighters were grinding in gyms, breaking down fight footage, and sticking to strict training regimes,
15 workouts a week to become a UFC champion,
one guy took a completely different route, a route filled with lies, fraud, and deception, so bold that it almost got him to the biggest stage in MMA. Meet Askar Makarov, a man who went from a certified nobody to a UFC fighter, all by fooling the system. This is the insane story of a fighter who was so determined to get to the UFC that he was willing to do absolutely anything to get there. Askar Makarov wasn't always Askar Makarov. He was born as Arthur Shatakov in Odessa, Ukraine, with a dream to make it in MMA. Unfortunately for Shatakov, his early career was, to put it kindly, a disaster. He made his MMA debut at just 19 years old, and within 39 seconds, he was submitted in the first round. Not exactly the dream start, right? But that's what happens when you don't have the skill set to back up your ambitions. He tried again a year later, but the outcome was the same. Another first-round loss by submission, this time against a low-level local opponent. You would think that after 2 losses, most fighters might reconsider their career path. But not Shatakov. He wasn't about to give up just yet. And to be fair, he wasn't the only one to struggle early on. After all, MMA is tough and there's no shame in losing early if you're willing to learn from your mistakes and improve. But here's the catch. Shatakov wasn't improving. He was stagnating. He lost his 3rd fight, again by submission and again in the first round. And to make matters worse, his opponent had a career record of 1-3, meaning Shatakov was his only win. Talk about a blow to the ego. At this point, Shatakov realized the harsh truth. His MMA skills weren't going to cut it. The UFC dream that he had once nurtured was slipping further and further away. So, what do you do when you've got a dream but no actual skills to make it happen? Well, if you're Askar Makarov, you turn to fraud. Yeah, that's right, fraud. Instead of spending more time honing his skills in the gym, Makarov decided to take a shortcut. He began meticulously crafting a fake career. He changed his name legally from Arthur Shatakov to Askar Makarov. Why? So he could escape his past, a past filled with losses. With a fresh identity, Makarov could wipe the slate clean and start over, hoping that the UFC would never catch on. But here's where it gets even crazier. This name change was only the beginning of his scheme. Makarov's next move? He started to fabricate victories. He claimed losses were other fighters, not him, and even went as far as creating fake fight promotions. That's right, he invented entire promotions that didn't even exist. He got so deep into it that he created fake fight posters, impersonated promoters, and even submitted fake fight footage to websites like SureDog and Topology. All of this was part of a long game to get a shiny, respectable fight record, one that would impress the UFC and get him a contract. It was nothing short of a masterclass in deception. By the time he'd built his new identity and padded his record with fake wins, Makarov had somehow transformed his dismal 7-8 record into an impressive 25-7. At this point, he was ready for the next step in his plan, tricking the UFC into signing him. The UFC, known for scouting fresh talent from all over the world, saw this 25-7 record and thought, hey, this guy must be legit. Let's bring him in for a fight. Little did they know, they were about to sign one of the biggest frauds in MMA history. At this point, Makarov's record was a complete fabrication. But when the UFC finally got their hands on him, they didn't do enough digging into his past. They looked at the fake wins, the fake record, and thought, this guy looks promising. But this is where the cracks started to show. As Makarov was preparing for his UFC debut, his fraudulent history started to catch up with him. Journalists and fight fans began to dig into his past, and the truth about his fake record started to surface. He wasn't fooling everyone anymore. His first major scandal came when reporters uncovered that 2 of his 25 wins had come from a completely fictional promotion called the Mongmong Championship. A quick search online showed that this promotion had no online presence whatsoever. In fact, it was so fake that even the fight footage couldn't be found. But even more embarrassing for Makarov, other fake wins began to surface. There was one where a victory was claimed to have taken place in a venue that had already been shut down months earlier. The fraud was unraveling fast. But that wasn't all. When the UFC started looking deeper into his fight history, they found multiple instances of him disputing legitimate losses. In fact, they discovered that Makarov had even tried to remove losses by claiming the fights never took place, despite video footage of him being defeated. undefeated. It was a mess. His record was a complete joke, and it was becoming harder to ignore the fact that this man had used fraud to get to the UFC. Still, the UFC decided to move forward with his debut. The stage was set. Mayarov was scheduled to fight Alonzo Manifield, a respected light heavyweight, and the MMA world was buzzing with excitement to see what the fraudster could do in the octagon. Could he really back up his 25-7 record, or was he a paper tiger? The pressure was on, and Mayarov walked into the octagon under the intense scrutiny of a watching world. The fight? Well, it wasn't even close. Mayarov was destroyed in the first round. He was taken down twice and pummeled with elbows while barely managing to land any significant strikes. His dream of fighting in the UFC was over before it even began. The man who had fabricated his way to the big stage was now exposed as a fraud in front of millions. But just when you thought it couldn't get worse, it did. Mayarov failed a drug test after the fight and was banned by the Nevada Athletic Commission for 6 months. His brief UFC career had come crashing down, and he was now officially labeled a cheater. The UFC cut him from the roster almost immediately after the loss, and his fake career was exposed for the world to see. Majarov's record, once proudly touted as 25-7, was now a source of ridicule. Sherdog and Topology amended his record to reflect the truth, and it dropped to 15-14 in some databases. His name was now synonymous with dishonesty and fraud, and his MMA career was officially over. But what happened after that? Well, Mayarov faded into obscurity. He never fought again. The man who had once fooled the UFC with a fake record and a string of lies was now left with nothing but a ruined reputation. His rise to the UFC, built on a foundation of lies, was a fleeting moment in MMA history, and though he managed to make it to the biggest stage in the sport, his dream was shattered in a matter of minutes. The moral of the story is a harsh one. No matter how far you go with deception, the truth will always catch up to you. Majarov's story is a reminder that shortcuts, lies, and fraud can only get you so far. In MMA, where the pressure is always on, you can't fake your way to the top. Eventually, your lack of skill and integrity will be exposed, and when that happens, the consequences can be brutal. Askar Majarov's rise and fall in the UFC will go down as one of the most embarrassing chapters in MMA history. He built a fake career, fooled the UFC into giving him a shot, and was promptly destroyed. The man who thought he could cheat his way to the top ended up being a cautionary tale. In the end, his UFC debut wasn't just the end of his career, it was the end of his MMA dream. And that, my friends, is why you can never underestimate the power of truth in the world of combat sports. So, this is the end for today's presentation. Don't forget to subscribe. Here is some extraordinary content that you can watch. See you in the next video.
I come from mountain, Dagestan. I trained all my life. My father teach us wrestling, combat sambo.
In Khabib, you have a guy that is 26-0, undefeated. That's unreal. At 26 wins, guys tend to make mistakes. Khabib has never done that.
Throughout the short, bloody history of mixed martial arts, it's hard to find a figure wrapped in as much myth as Khabib Nurmagomedov. Undefeated lightweight champion, head coach to the current pound-for-pound king, winner of the biggest fight in UFC history. Even years after retirement, people still recite the same lines. He mauled everyone, he was never really hurt, and in a sport of cuts and broken bones, he somehow retired without ever bleeding. Add a spotless 29-0 record, and you get something close to a legend rather than a normal athlete. Other greats don't get that same aura. Demetrius Johnson and Georges St-Pierre lost. John Jones has failed drug tests and has a cloud over multiple wins. Islam Makhachev, despite an absurd run of dominance, still has that one KO loss early in his career. Khabib, by contrast, is treated like the one completely clean monster. Dominant in the cage, principled outside it. Off the mat, the story is even more polished. Khabib is framed as the devout Muslim and family man who retired to honor a promise to his mother after the death of his father and coach Abdulmanap. The Guardian even named him the second most popular Muslim athlete on earth, behind only Mohamed Salah. In a sport where many stars collect DUIs, assault cases, and headlines about substance abuse, Khabib looks like the adult in the room, the man who choked out Conor McGregor, refused alcohol sponsors, and talks about God more than money. That's the myth, the righteous champion, the good guy of MMA. But what if there's another side to that story? Family, faith, and cousin marriage. Let's start with something people tiptoe around: Khabib's marriage. In 2013, he married Patamat, a childhood friend described in Russian media as a distant relative. In Dagestan, that isn't unusual. Many ethnic groups in the region have long traditions of marrying inside clans and extended families. Geneticists have actually studied these mountain communities. Work led by Kazima Bulayeva shows that some Dagestani isolates have inbreeding coefficients around 0.010 to 0.015, meaning people's parents are on average more closely related than in most European or North American populations. That's not a moral judgment, it's a statistic. Consanguinity cousin marriage raises the odds of pairing harmful recessive variants, which in turn increases rates of certain genetic diseases like some forms of muscular dystrophy, hearing loss, and psychiatric disorders. The same research notes that some Dagestani communities have unusually high rates of complex diseases, including schizophrenia, precisely because those small, isolated populations recirculate the same variants over generations. None of this means everyone from Dagestan is sick, and that's nonsense. It just means the genetic lottery there is harsher. Some people get unlucky, others are completely healthy and exceptionally robust, which is exactly the kind of person who can survive childhood in a tough environment and then go on to grind through a lifetime of combat sports. Khabib doesn't hide where he comes from, he leans into tradition. From the papaka hat to the stories about the mountains and his father's training methods. But when you put all of that against the ultra-sanitized image built by the UFC and Gulf investors, the picture starts to look less like a saint and more like a complicated human being from a complicated play. NFTs, papakas, and digital gold dust. Now we get to the money side where things stop looking very holy very fast. In 2021, right after retiring, Khabib launched a set of official NFT cards to commemorate his career. There were gold, platinum, and ultra-rare diamond cards. The numbers were symbolic: 290 gold cards, 29 platinum cards, references to his 29 and 0 record. The gold cards originally sold for around $2,900, and the platinum ones for a wild $29,000 each. Unsold cards were supposed to be burned or permanently destroyed on chain to increase scarcity and in theory keep prices high. Fast forward a few years and reality did what reality always does to hype. On secondary markets, many of those NFTs have crashed in value by well over 90%. Some have traded for a few $100s and a few sales have been for essentially pocket change compared to the original mint price. If you bought in as a fan expecting a Khabib investment opportunity, you probably got suplexed by the market. Then came the partnership with Go Mining, formerly Gmine, a crypto mining platform. Together they released the Khabib NFT collection, digital miners that supposedly gave you 29 terahashes per second of Bitcoin mining power, 29 again, plus access to Khabib's private club with the promise of dinners in Dubai and exclusive events. Crypto scam watchdog CoffeeZilla took one look and called it out as a bad deal. Tiny payouts, ongoing electricity and maintenance fees, and a structure where holders could easily end up losing money. At one point, OpenSea disabled trading on some of these assets, citing policy violations. For a guy who lectures about clean money and morals, it's a pretty ugly look to be front and center on a product critics argue was designed more to milk fans than to make them any real profit. And then we get to the Papaka digital gifts on Telegram. Collectible stickers themed around Khabib's iconic hat and controversially his late father. Russian media reported that auctions of these assets brought in something like 347 million rubles, around $4 to $5 million at the time, from what are functionally glorified messenger stickers whose long-term value is highly questionable. When Conor McGregor mocked him for monetizing his culture and his father's memory, Khabib responded not with reflection, but with more advertising copy about exclusive digital gifts with real-time value on the greatest messaging platform in the world. It read more like a corporate press release than a post from the kid who wrestled in dusty Dagestani gym. Wahed, halal money and the SEC, another pillar of Khabib's good guy persona, is his stance on money. He's repeatedly slammed gambling, refused betting sponsors, and positioned himself as the face of halal or Islam-compliant finance. That's where Wahed Invest comes in. Wahed is a financial services firm that offers Sharia-compliant portfolios and an ETF tracking the UFC USA Sharia Index. Khabib joined as a brand ambassador and investor in 2021, fronting campaigns aimed squarely at Muslim retail investors who trust him as a moral figure. The problem is that regulators haven't been impressed. In 2022, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission charged Wahed with making misleading statements, failing to rebalance portfolios as advertised, and launching a proprietary ETF using client money without properly disclosing conflicts of interest. Wahed settled, paid a $300,000 penalty, and agreed to fix its compliance issues. Then in 2024, the SEC hit them again for violating the new marketing rule, using paid athlete endorsements without proper disclosure and advertising advertising hypothetical performance without having the required policies in place. The order specifically calls out ads that use professional athletes who were also investors in Wahed's parent company, exactly the kind of trusted face sells complex product relationship Khabib is in. On top of that, investigative reporting by Hyphen showed that a Wahed-linked Sharia ETF held sizable stakes in companies like Microsoft, Alphabet, Google, Valero, Axon Enterprises, and Monster Beverage, all of which have been criticized by activists for their roles in or connections to Israel's military and security infrastructure. Wahed's own chief risk officer wrote to the main Islamic standards body asking for new criteria to avoid companies involved in alleged human rights abuses, but also admitted that fully divesting would be a long, complicated process that could even shut the fund down. Why none of this means Khabib is personally committing fraud, but when you put your religious credibility on the line to promote ethical, halal investing and your chosen partner keeps getting slapped by the SEC and criticized over its holdings, you can't just shrug and say, all good, brother. G42, AI, and the surveillance problem. In late 2025, Khabib began promoting G42, an Abu Dhabi-based AI and data company chaired by Sheikh Tanoon bin Zayed Al Nahyan, a key figure in the UAE's security establishment. On the surface, it sounds like the usual big tech plus big star partnership, tokenization of Khabib gyms, fancy real-world asset tokens, and more digital access to the Eagle brand. The baggage comes from G42's past. Investigations by the New York Times and others reported that ToTalk, a free calling app widely used in the Middle East, was actually a UAE surveillance tool, allegedly used by the state to monitor users' conversations and movements. G42 was identified as the company behind ToTalk. Apple and Google pulled the app from their stores after those reports. So when Khabib stands next to G42 and sells futuristic blockchain gym AI products, he isn't just doing a tech ad. He's lending his halo to a company that has been linked to mass surveillance and state security projects. Given how loudly he talks about justice, morality, and protecting the vulnerable, the alliance raises awkward questions. Oligarch money and Eagles MMA Khabib's clean image also tends to skip over who bankrolled his rise. Eagles MMA, the team and management outfit he fronted during his UFC run, was co-founded in 2016 with Ziavuddin Magomedov, a Dagestani billionaire and head of the Soma Group. Magomedov didn't just slap his name on a banner, he funded Khabib's training camps and even paid for the back surgery in Germany that saved his career in 2017. Without that money, there's a real chance the legendary title run never happened. Then the Russian state came knocking. In 2018, Magomedov was arrested on charges of running an organized criminal group and embezzling around 11 billion rubles, roughly $180 million from state projects, including infrastructure linked to the 2018 World Cup. He was eventually convicted and handed a 19-year sentence in a penal colony. Khabib publicly appealed to Vladimir Putin to help his sponsor, calling for mercy on the man whose fortune had just been branded corrupt by Russian courts. Again, it doesn't mean Khabib designed the fraud schemes, but the reality is simple. The humble mountain kid was powered to the top of the sport by money coming from the very oligarchic system he now pretends to stand above. Macron, Dagestan, and the moral tightrope. The most disturbing gap between Khabib's image and his actions shows up around politics and violence. After French teacher Samuel Paty was beheaded in October 2020 for showing cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad during a class on free speech, and after a separate terrorist attack in Nice murdered 3 churchgoers, President Emmanuel Macron defended France's secularism and the right to publish such cartoons. Khabib's response: an Instagram post of Macron's face stamped with a boot print, accompanied by a caption asking God to disfigure the face of this creature and humiliate them in this life and the next, quoting Quran 33:57 and warning that these provocations will come back to them. The end is always for the God-fearing. He didn't praise the killers directly, but to millions of followers, his message was clear. The real villains weren't the extremists who butchered civilians. They were the politicians defending speech law. Coming from someone who had previously asked the world to pray for Muslim victims in New Zealand, the double standard is hard to miss. Then in June 2024, attacks on churches, synagogues, and police in the Dagestani cities of Derbent and Makashkala left more than 20 people dead. Russian authorities announced that one of the attackers, Gadzhimurad Kagirov, had trained with Eagles MMA and been described as a student of Abdulmanap. That connection led the FSB to search Khabib's gym as part of a wider investigation. Khabib condemned the attacks and insisted Kagirov had only done a training camp with the team and was not an official member, which aligns with later reporting. It would be unfair to say Khabib trained terrorists, but when you combine his public rhetoric about Macron with the fact that at least one terrorist did pass through his training environment, the whole purely purely apolitical, purely moral image gets very shaky. The myth and the man. None of this erases what Khabib did in the cage. He's one of the most dominant fighters the sport has ever seen. His relationship with his father is genuinely moving. His discipline and work ethic are real, but the point of looking at the other side is simple. He is not the spotless hero that UFC promos, Gulf money, and social media would like you to believe. He's a man who embraced high-risk, hype-driven NFT and crypto projects that left many fans holding worthless assets, fronted a halal investment brand that has twice been charged by the SEC and invests via an index in companies criticized for profiting from war, built his team with the backing of an oligarch later convicted of massive state embezzlement, published a wildly inflammatory post about a democratically elected head of state days after terrorist attacks, framing free speech as the real problem rather than the murderers themselves. You can still admire the fighter, you can still enjoy rewatching the McGregor mauling or the Gaethje masterclass, but if someone tries to sell you the story that Khabib Nurmagomedov is a uniquely righteous, untouchable moral example in MMA, remember everything you've just seen. Icons are allowed to be complicated. The danger starts when we pretend they're not. Thanks for watching. Check out the other cards on the screen. See you on the next video. So don't forget to subscribe.
The story of Matt Hamill is one of resilience, determination, and breaking barriers. Born deaf, Hamill grew up facing challenges most of us can only imagine. Yet, he defied the odds and became one of the most respected fighters in UFC history. This is the heart-touching journey of a man who proved that no matter what life throws at you, with hard work and perseverance, you can achieve greatness. Today, we're diving into the story of Matt Hamill, the deaf fighter who conquered MMA, the beginning, growing up with silence. Matt Hamill's journey began in 1976 in the small town of Loveland, Ohio. Born with a hearing impairment, he faced a world that was often challenging to navigate. His condition was due to a combination of illnesses, and as a result, he was born completely deaf. While this was a significant challenge, it didn't deter Matt. From the moment he could walk, he found his own way to engage with the world around him. Growing up, Matt faced the typical challenges of a child trying to fit in, but with one major difference: he couldn't hear. While many children learned how to interchapter with the world through sound, Matt had to learn in his own way. He faced bullying and exclusion, but it didn't take long for him to find a refuge in sports. Wrestling was a natural fit. While his friends on the playground were learning the traditional ways of sports, Matt was teaching himself how to wrestle. Wrestling was a sport based on technique and strategy qualities Matt was already excelling in. His wrestling coach, recognizing Matt's potential, gave him the tools and the encouragement to focus on wrestling, knowing that his physical abilities were stronger than most. In high school, Matt became a standout wrestler. His ability to read his opponent's body movements without relying on auditory cues gave him an advantage. He didn't need to hear the referee's whistle or his opponent's footsteps. His focus, observation, and timing were all he needed. Matt excelled, earning the respect of his peers, and ultimately becoming a 3-time NCAA All-American wrestler at the University of Rochester. Despite his success in wrestling, Matt's dream extended beyond the collegiate mats. He wanted more. The world of mixed martial arts, MMA, was calling his name, and he wasn't going to let his disability hold him back. Transition to MMA new challenge. In the early 2000s, MMA was still a relatively new sport. The UFC was in its infancy, and the idea of transitioning from wrestling into MMA was considered a bold move for anyone, let alone someone who had no experience in striking arts like boxing or kickboxing. But for Matt Hamill, this challenge was just another mountain to climb. Matt's first steps into MMA were a huge leap. He knew that MMA was not just about wrestling, it was a combination of disciplines: striking, submissions, and control. Despite being known for his dominant wrestling, Matt had to learn how to deal with everything else. He wasn't a boxer, a kickboxer, or a jiu-jitsu specialist, but he was a fighter, and that's all that mattered. In 2001, Matt made his MMA debut, and though he lost his first professional fight, he showed flashes of brilliance. The fight was against Chris Keon, a fighter with experience in both striking and grappling. Though Matt was outmatched in some areas, his resilience shone through. He refused to quit and pushed through the rounds, making a statement that would echo throughout his MMA journey. He was a fighter, not not just a wrestler. Breaking Barriers, The Ultimate Fighter Journey. In 2006, the UFC provided Matt with an incredible opportunity. He was invited to appear on The Ultimate Fighter Season 3. This reality show, which aired on Spike TV, was a turning point for many fighters. It was the proving ground that launched many careers in the UFC, and for Matt, it would be a chance to show the world that being deaf wasn't an obstacle, it was a part of his identity. The challenges in the Ultimate Fighter house were grueling. Fighters were subjected to intense training, strict dieting, and constant mental pressure. Matt, however, was used to facing adversity head-on. His lack of hearing did not set him back. It made him focus more on what he could control: his work ethic, his attitude, and his heart. He wasn't concerned with hearing the instructions of his coaches or the trash talk of his competitors. Instead, he used his wrestling as his foundation and quickly earned respect from his fellow competitors. Although Matt didn't win the competition, he made an indelible impression on everyone around him. His perseverance and unbreakable spirit shone through. He became a symbol of how fighting against the odds can lead to success, regardless of what those odds are. This was just the beginning of what would be a remarkable UFC career, the UFC career of Fighter's Resolve. Matt's UFC debut came in 2006 when he faced Jesse Forbes. Despite being considered an underdog, Matt emerged victorious in his first fight in the UFC. He won by unanimous decision, earning respect for his grit and determination. This win helped solidify Matt as a real contender in the world of MMA. Over the next few years, Matt faced many ups and downs. He battled injuries, faced top-tier opponents, and even suffered some losses. But through it all, Matt remained focused and unwavering. One of his most memorable matches came in 2008 when he fought Rashad Evans at UFC 88. Though Matt lost the fight by decision, he held his own against a seasoned veteran. His heart and his relentless wrestling style earned him a lot of fans, but it also proved to the world that Matt Hamill was more than just a wrestler, he was a true fighter. What made Matt stand out wasn't just his skill, it was his spirit. He didn't let his deafness stop him from becoming a top-level MMA fighter. He fought in a world where communication is key. But instead of seeing his deafness as a limitation, he turned it into an asset. While many fighters relied on verbal cues and instructions, Matt could rely solely on his instincts and his deep understanding of the sport. His success was proof that MMA wasn't just about what you hear, it's about what you feel, what you know, and what you're willing to sacrifice. Matt's legacy more than a fighter. Matt Hamill's story isn't just one of wins and losses. It's a story of breaking barriers and changing the perception of what it means to be a fighter. Matt didn't just change the landscape of MMA, he changed the way people view deaf athletes in every sport. His career was groundbreaking, not just for his ability to wrestle and fight, but for the way he brought awareness to the challenges faced by people with disabilities. After retiring from MMA, Matt didn't disappear from the spotlight. Instead, he became a voice for others like him, those who face adversity and never give up. He spoke openly about the difficulties of being a deaf athlete in a hearing world and advocated for other disabled athletes. He showed that, like any other fighter, people with disabilities can achieve greatness and break through barriers. He also dedicated himself to coaching wrestling and continued to mentor younger fighters, sharing his experiences and wisdom. His legacy was not only about his performances in the octagon, but also about the lives he touched along the way. Matt Hamill's story is one of overcoming the odds and proving that resilience, heart, and determination can break down any barrier. His career in MMA is a testament to what can be achieved when you refuse to let challenges define you. Matt showed the world that being deaf didn't make him any less of a fighter, it made him more powerful, more focused, and more relentless. Through every punch, every slam, every victory, and every loss, Matt Hamill proved one thing: no matter where you come from, no matter what obstacles you face, you can rise above it. You can achieve greatness. Matt Hamill is not just a fighter, he's an inspiration to anyone who has ever been told they can't do something because of who they are or where they come from. Matt Hamill, the deaf fighter who never backed down. His legacy will live on for generations, reminding us all that true champions are made not just by their victories, but by their ability to overcome the impossible. Thanks for tuning in, subscribe to MMA now, and I'll catch you in the next one.
When I was 17 years old, I saw the UFC game at a friend's house, and I said, I'm gonna be in the UFC, and I'm gonna become a champion.
Everyone imagines world champions standing tall, basking in the glory of victory. But have you ever wondered what really happens when the spotlight fades and they walk away from the sport? From a fighter left broken to a legend whose retirement was overshadowed by heartbreak, this is the story of Jose Aldo, a UFC legend whose career was built on dominance, shattered in mere seconds, and ultimately ended in painful circumstances. Let's rewind to May 2025, an unforgettable night inside an arena packed with fans who had watched Aldo rise to the top for over a decade. Standing in the center of the octagon, tears streaming down his face, Jose Aldo da Silva Oliveira Jr. took off his gloves and gently laid them on the canvas. This wasn't just any retirement, this was the emotional farewell of a man who had given everything to the sport, and the fight that led to this moment was no ordinary battle. His final fight was against Ayman Zahabi at UFC 315. From the outset, it was clear this would be a far from ideal ending for Aldo. Aldo had missed the bantamweight limit by a significant margin, forcing a last-minute switch to featherweight, which caused chaos in his preparation. As if that wasn't enough, Aldo was also dealing with multiple injuries and illnesses that would have caused most fighters to pull out, but not Aldo. He kept pushing forward, determined to honor his legacy in his final fight. Yet, despite all his efforts, the judge's decision was a unanimous loss for Aldo. The MMA world was in shock. Fellow fighters and analysts alike erupted, calling the decision one of the worst in the sport's history. Renato Moicano, a fellow Brazilian fighter, declared it the worst decision in MMA history, and even UFC legends like Angela Hill and Quinton Rampage Jackson criticized the judging. Aldo's longtime friend, Rafael dos Anjos, even blamed the judges for forcing Aldo into an unceremonious retirement. But for Jose Aldo, that loss was secondary to a far deeper realization. Standing in the octagon, exhausted, both physically and emotionally, he knew that this was it. The fire that had driven him for over 20 years, fueled by relentless ambition, sacrifices, and unimaginable dedication, had finally burned out. In his tearful announcement, Aldo spoke with raw vulnerability, a side that was rarely seen in the world of mixed martial arts. He wasn't just stepping away from the sport, he was stepping away from the only life he had ever known. The emotional weight of his words hit hard. This wasn't a calculated promotional move. This was a man who had reached the absolute limit of his physical and mental endurance. The decision to retire wasn't based on strategy or marketability. It was simply a man realizing that he couldn't go to war again, not in the same way. The injuries, the constant pressure, and the never-ending grind had taken their toll. For Aldo, this was the end of a journey that began long before he became a champion. This wasn't Aldo's first retirement. In fact, he had announced his retirement in September 2022, after a loss to Merab Dvalishvili. At that time, he spoke about wanting to focus on his family, especially his newborn son. But retirement didn't stick. The Octagon called him back, and by May 2024, Aldo returned to the UFC. He defeated Jonathan Martinez in a triumphant comeback that reminded everyone of his greatness. It was a moment of glory that earned him the title of Comeback Fighter of the Year. But even with his return, the damage had already been done. Aldo's body was ravaged by years of battles in the cage. His fighting spirit remained, but it was clear that his body was no longer the same. He went on to lose again in October 2024 to Mario Bautista, and following the controversial decision against Zahabi, Aldo knew it was time. It was official. His journey in the UFC had come to an end. His final record stands at 32-10 with 17 knockouts, a legacy that will never be forgotten. He was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame in 2023, cementing his place among the greatest fighters to ever step foot in the octagon. The story of Jose Aldo is one of unrelenting pursuit of greatness, but it's also a story of devastating loss. The physical toll of his career is staggering. He had suffered numerous injuries over the years, each one more damaging than the last. He withdrew from UFC 125 due to a neck injury, missed UFC 153 because of a motorcycle accident that left him with a foot injury, and nearly withdrew from UFC 189 due to a rib fracture. These are just a few examples of the countless setbacks Aldo endured over his career. But through it all, he kept fighting. He kept pushing himself, refusing to back down. However, the human body has its limits, and for Aldo, that limit was reached in 2025. But how did Jose Aldo, a fighter who once dominated the featherweight division with unmatched precision and skill, end up in such heartbreaking circumstances? To understand this, we need to go back to the moment that changed everything, the 13 seconds that shattered his dynasty. By December 2015, Jose Aldo was the undisputed king of the featherweight division. He had been unbeaten for over 10 years, holding the featherweight title for 7 consecutive defenses. He was considered untouchable, a champion who seemed destined to reign forever. But then, Conor McGregor entered the scene. McGregor, with his brash personality and knockout power, became the perfect foil for Aldo. The psychological warfare that McGregor unleashed on Aldo was unlike anything the Brazilian champion had ever experienced. McGregor's relentless trash-talking and mind games were a challenge for Aldo, who had always preferred to let his fighting do the talking. The two fighters embarked on a press tour that took them around the world, and McGregor made it his mission to get inside Aldo's head. But McGregor didn't just play mind games, he backed it up with a devastating performance at UFC 194. In a fight that lasted just 13 seconds, Conor McGregor knocked out Jose Aldo to claim the featherweight title. It was the fastest title fight finish in UFC history, and it sent shockwaves through the MMA world. For Aldo, it was more than just a loss, it was the end of an era. The invincible champion who had ruled the featherweight division for nearly a decade was now dethroned in a matter of seconds. The aftermath was crushing for Aldo. He wanted an immediate rematch to prove that the loss was a fluke, but McGregor moved on to bigger challenges, leaving Aldo with a loss that would haunt him for years. Aldo tried to pick himself back up. He won an interim title at UFC 200 against Frankie Edgar, reminding everyone of his greatness. But despite the victories, the damage had been done. He would go on to lose again to Max Holloway, Marlon Moraes, and Petr Yan, and his career was never the same. But through it all, Aldo's legacy remained intact. He is still widely regarded as one of the greatest featherweights in UFC history. His 7 consecutive title defenses are a record that still stands, and his contributions to the sport will never be forgotten. But his career was marked by controversy, heartbreak, and a relentless pursuit of greatness that ultimately came at a cost. In retirement, Aldo has found peace. He spends time with his family, his wife Viviane, and their children. He has allowed himself to rest after decades of fighting. But even now, the MMA world still remembers Aldo as one of its most dominant champions, a fighter who gave everything to the sport and left it all in the octagon. Jose Aldo's journey serves as a reminder of the price of greatness. His story is one of triumph, tragedy, and ultimately redemption. From a young boy growing up in poverty in Brazil to becoming a UFC Hall of Famer, Aldo's legacy will continue to inspire fighters for generations to come. But in the end, it wasn't the decisions in the octagon that defined him. It was his heart, his resilience, and his willingness to keep fighting, even when the fight had already taken everything from him. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.
It only took one punch to shatter the cheers, to hush the chants that echo through a boxing ring like a hymn to courage. One punch, a single, devastating uppercut, brought down more than a fighter. It brought down a teacher, a father, a friend. It left a little boy without his hero and left an entire community asking, was it worth it? Tim Hague was never just a fighter. Long before his name appeared on UFC fight cards or boxing posters, he was Mr. Hague, the soft-spoken English teacher who walked the halls of École Bellevue School in Beaumont, Alberta. He was the gentle giant who loved Shakespeare as much as he loved a good scrap. The man who would get knocked out on Saturday and show up to teach his grade 5 students on Monday with a smile and a black eye. Born in Boyle, Alberta in 1983, Tim's childhood was marked by the grit and warmth of small-town Canada. He grew up in a family that knew hard work and struggle. He fell in love with mixed martial arts in his 20s, chasing the dream that so many young fighters do. A shot at greatness, a chance to stand under bright lights with his fists raised high. Tim found some glory too. He fought 5 times in the UFC's heavyweight division. He scored an upset win in his debut, tapping out Pat Barry at UFC 98. But in the years that followed, the knockouts came faster than the victories. Concussions piled up like unpaid bills. By the time he turned to boxing, Tim was chasing more than pride. He was fighting for rent, for groceries, for his son, Brady. June 16, 2017 was supposed to be just another night under the spotlights. The Shaw Conference Center in Edmonton pulsed with anticipation as fans gathered for KO Boxing 79. The main event, Tim Hague versus Adam Braidwood, a local slugger and former CFL football player with knockout power in both fists. From the start, it was a mismatch. Braidwood was younger, fresher, and undefeated. Hague, by contrast, had already suffered a TKO loss just 2 months prior, his 8th knockout loss across MMA and boxing. Yet he climbed into the ring anyway, carrying the weight of debts and a father's promise to keep trying. The crowd roared as the bell rang, but by the second round, those cheers turned to uneasy murmurs. Hague went down 3 times, each time blinking through the haze, forcing himself back onto unsteady legs. A fan sitting ringside would later tell a reporter, "You could see he was done, but he just kept standing up. He was too proud, too stubborn to stay down." Then, in the final round, it happened. The uppercut. It snapped Hague's head back like a rag doll's. He crumpled to the canvas, eyes wide but vacant. As the referee knelt beside him, the arena fell into a stunned, suffocating silence. Some fans wept, others just stared. A little boy clutched his father's hand and asked if the big man would be okay. Tim never woke up. By Sunday, Tim Hague's family was faced with an impossible choice. The brain injury he sustained in that final fall was catastrophic. Machines kept him breathing, but there was no hope. His brother posted the news on Facebook. Tim has passed away. He was surrounded by family, listening to his favorite songs. We miss him so greatly. In the hours that followed, social media became a candlelight vigil of its own. Fans from across Canada and around the world shared memories. "He once gave me his fight gloves after a loss," one fan wrote. "He said he didn't win tonight, but hoped I would win my own battles. Rest easy, champ." A fellow fighter tweeted, "Tim Hague was the guy who would lend you gas money when you needed it. He didn't deserve this. No fighter does." In his classroom, students placed flowers on his desk, some bringing in cards that read, "We will miss you, Mr. Hague. You were our hero." For Brady, just 6 years old, the world suddenly felt colder, emptier. The father who once lifted him onto his shoulders at the zoo was gone, the same shoulders that had carried so much for so long. Edmonton's combat sports community reeled. Promoters, coaches, and fighters alike wondered how they had let one of their own step into that ring in the first place. A parent in the audience that night would later say, "You never think you're watching someone's final moments when you buy a ticket, but now I can't get that sound out of my head. That final punch." As grief gave way to anger, questions emerged. How was Tim even allowed to fight? He had been knocked out multiple times before, 5 times in MMA alone, and more in training. He had reportedly told his doctor about ongoing headaches and a concussion in sparring weeks before the fight. An investigation revealed troubling lapses. The Edmonton Combative Sports Commission, responsible for fighter safety, approved Tim to fight without requiring updated medical imaging or a neurological exam. Critics pointed out that, in other jurisdictions, a fighter with Tim's record would likely have been denied a license. Dr. Pat Reed, the commission's head, resigned amid outrage. Alberta's government responded by suspending Edmonton's entire Combative Sports Commission. A moratorium on future combat events in the city was announced, citing the need for stricter protocols. Tim's family later filed a lawsuit against the city for negligence. They claimed that the commission failed to ensure Hague's safety despite clear warning signs. In court documents, they painted a picture of a man who should have never been allowed to fight that night. Tim Hague's death did not happen in a vacuum. It was the culmination of a culture that romanticizes toughness, that praises fighters for pushing past their limits, for standing up when they should stay down. Repeated head trauma is no secret in combat sports. The stories are there. Muhammad Ali, who gave the world poetry in motion but paid with Parkinson's, countless NFL players living with CTE, boxers whose names we only remember because of how they fell. Yet, for all the gloves and wraps and weigh-ins, protections are still too often paper-thin. Fighters can be their own worst enemies, refusing to quit out of pride, fear, or desperation. Commissions and promoters, driven by ticket sales, sometimes look the other way. Tim Hague's death asks us to see the human cost behind the spectacle. It begs a simple question: how many more? How many more young boys will lose their fathers? How many more mothers will bury their sons before we say the risk is too high? For those who knew Tim best, his legacy isn't about how he fell, but how he lived. He was the gentle giant who read bedtime stories in the same booming voice he used to call out opponents in the cage. The teacher who would show up at a student's hockey game on a snowy Saturday just to cheer them on. A friend recalled, He'd get punched in the face all night, then take the guy out for a beer afterward. That was Tim. He never held a grudge. He loved country music, old cars, and road trips through the Alberta countryside. He loved hearing his sons' giggles as they made pancakes together on lazy mornings. He loved teaching, maybe more than fighting, because, as he once told a student, kids are worth fighting for. If there's anything worth taking away from Tim Haig's story, it's that no thrill, no victory, no paycheck is worth a life. Fighters should be protected from the worst parts of themselves, the part that says, just one more round. Support tougher medical screenings. Demand that commissions put fighter welfare before ticket sales. Celebrate the courage it takes to walk away while you still can. And if you love combat sports, love the people in it enough to care about what happens when the lights go out and the arena goes quiet. One uppercut silenced a champion's heart, but it should never silence our voices. We owe it to Tim Haig, to every fighter, to ask the hard questions, to hold the system accountable, and to promise that no one else will pay for our entertainment with their life. Because in the end, no roar of the crowd is louder than the silence that follows a heartbeat stilled too soon.
Yo, just when you thought UFC drama was all played out, here comes Ilia Topuria, the dude who went from living through war to becoming the baddest villain in the UFC.
Ladies and gentlemen, the new champion, Ilia Topuria!
They're gonna tell you you can do it. They're gonna knock you down and doubt you. But guess what? The only person you need to achieve anything in this life is yourself.
But here's the real kicker. The guy who made it all happen, he's literally been living in Ilia's shadow and nobody's talking about him. Crazy, right? But before we jump into the hype, let's take a minute to talk about where Ilia really came from. Born in Georgia, during one of the most chaotic times the world has seen, Ilia's early years were anything but easy. Imagine growing up in a country constantly at odds with its neighbors, where every day feels like you're just one step away from a war zone. This guy didn't just watch war on the news, he lived it. And it wasn't just any war. It was Russia versus Georgia, and Ilia was right in the middle of it. Bruh, he's seen it all. Bombing runs, street fights, survival instincts kicking in when the world seems like it's falling apart. But the kid didn't fold. Nah, he became a straight-up fighter. At just 9 years old, when most kids are still figuring out how to ride a bike, Ilia's world got flipped upside down. His parents? Yeah, they made the tough call to go to Spain, hoping to build a better life and eventually bring their kids to join them. But Ilia and his siblings? They were left behind in Georgia, dealing with the fallout of a war-torn country, growing up faster than anyone should. That's some heavy stuff. But Ilia wasn't about to let that situation break him. He wasn't just a regular kid. Nah, he became the man of the house. His two older sisters stepped up, playing mom and dad. They had to take care of him, his brother, and everything else that came with a war-torn household. Ilia was literally surviving on his own, learning how to grow up quick while his parents were doing their best from far away. But here's the kicker. Instead of letting all that sadness and hardship swallow him whole, Ilia got extra savage. He didn't sit around feeling sorry for himself. He turned his pain into something real, Greco-Roman wrestling. At just 9, he was already grappling with life. Fast forward a few years, and Ilia's a straight-up beast in the gym. He's got the strength, the technique, and the hunger. The dude's not just fighting for fun, he's fighting because that's all he's ever known. At 15, this dude made the choice that most would never have the guts to do. He dropped out of school. Yup, no more math, no more science. He was like, screw that, I'm chasing my dreams. His dream? To become an MMA legend. And he didn't just go all in on his passion. The dude worked 4 jobs to fund his training. Talk about grind mode. He wasn't just working for some extra cash. He was working for his future, for his chance to fight in the UFC. And then, boom, UFC calls. They give him the shot, and Ilia's like, bet, let's go. Now, we've got to talk about that moment at UFC London. Ilia versus Ilot Ayoria. Ilia lands a head kick so clean, Ayoria drops like a sack of potatoes. The crowd's losing it, the commentators are freaking out, and Ilia, he's just there, as cool as you like. He doesn't rush in to finish him off. Instead, he backs off, gives a little slap, and just stands there, watching as Ayoria tries to recover. Why? Because Ilia knows the deal. He's getting paid regardless. Savage. Pure savage energy. This isn't just about winning, it's about dominance. But that's not the only thing that's been making waves.
Fuck you, bitch. Fuck you, bitch.
Oh no, Ilya has been taking shots at Paddy Pimblett, and trust me, it's been spicy. The trash talk, next level, the beef, personal. Ilya's not holding back, and the UFC fans are eating it up. Why? Because Ilya's the real deal. Fans love to hate him, but they can't look away. And let's not forget how the dude handled that whole situation with the trash talk. He was dropping bombs like he was born for this. He doesn't just talk the talk, he walks the walk. Every word, every move, every fight, he backs it up with confidence and skill. But here's where it gets interesting. Ilya is not just a fighter, he's a swagger machine. The dude's confidence? Off the charts. He doesn't just believe in his talent, he knows he's going to be a champ. Before his first UFC fight, he wasn't nervous, he wasn't scared, he was like, this is my time. And that kind of mindset, well, that's what separates the legends from the average fighters. For real, Ilya had his eyes on the title long before he even made it to the UFC. And now, he's just showing the world exactly what he's made of. Now, let's talk about his personal life, because this guy's journey isn't just about fighting. Ilya's also got that deep family connection. He's got his 2 sisters, his grandparents, and a wife that's 100% ride or die. This isn't just about being a fighter, it's about being a man of the people. The loyalty he has to his family is insane. He's out here fighting for more than just a belt. He's fighting to give his family the life they deserve. When his whole squad arrives to watch him fight, that's a moment. A full circle moment. For real. And yeah, the UFC knows they've got a star on their hands. Ilya's the hottest thing in the game right now, and he's just warming up. His rise? It's not by accident. The UFC's social media is blowing up because of him. Sponsorships? Through the roof. Fans? Loyal as hell. Ilya's creating his own brand. When he steps into that cage, it's not just about the fight anymore. It's about legacy. He's making sure everyone knows his name, and when he wins that title, it's going to be one of the biggest stories in UFC history. Let's not forget about the business side of this all. Ilya's got it figured out. While other fighters are just looking for a paycheck, Ilya's building a legacy. He's got viral moments, sponsorships, fans, and a whole movement behind him. He's not just fighting for a title, he's fighting for forever. When this dude gets the belt, it won't just be a win. It'll be the moment where he becomes a global icon. And Ilya's story doesn't end when he wins the belt. No, fam. This is just the beginning. The documentary is coming, and trust me, it's going to be lit. The rise of Ilya Topuria, from the war zone to the top of the UFC. That's the kind of story that makes you believe anything is possible. His journey's going to inspire a whole new generation of fighters, and the best part? He's still got so much more to give. Whatever happens next, win, lose, or draw, Ilya's already a legend in the making. He's the real deal. He's bringing the storm. And the UFC, they're just along for the ride, no doubt. Mark my words, Ilya Topuria is the future of UFC, and it's about to get wild. Keep your eyes on this guy, because he's on a mission, and he's coming for that title. Dricus du Plessis' journey to UFC stardom was never meant to be a straight path. It was a tumultuous ride of battles, both inside and outside the octagon, where raw talent, relentless determination, and unwavering national pride played crucial roles. From the rural South African farms to a global fighting stage, Dricus' rise wasn't just a tale of athletic prowess, but a mission to represent an entire continent and redefine what it means to be an African champion in the UFC. Born and raised on a farm in South Africa, Dricus du Plessis was destined for greatness. He didn't come from a family of fighters, but his father instilled a deep sense of hard work, competition, and self-belief in him. Dricus' early days were shaped by the gritty South African countryside, where his father's example set the foundation for his future. At just 5 years old, he began his martial arts journey with a passion that only grew stronger with each passing year. By the time he was 19, he had already made a mark in South Africa's EFC, Extreme Fighting Championship, a stage that would serve as his launchpad into the global MMA spotlight. Despite early career missteps, including a freak accident that saw his opponent injure his knee in his debut fight, Dricus' resilience never wavered. A brutal loss in a title fight just months into his career only sparked a fire within him, igniting a relentless pursuit to become one of the most feared fighters in the world. Dricus' turning point came with a decision that changed the trajectory of his career, moving down to welterweight to help a teammate claim middleweight gold, marking a selfless move that would propel him further into the UFC's radar. At the same time, Dricus knew his career could only go forward from here, but his battles with weight, his grappling struggles, and his fierce will to win would be put to the test. Fast forward to a fight that would forever solidify Dricus du Plessis' name in UFC history, his entry into the UFC against Robert Whittaker. The world watched as Dricus, a relative unknown at the time, stepped into the octagon to challenge one of the best middleweights the sport had ever seen. Though many doubted his ability to face such an experienced champion, Dricus stepped up to the plate with a heart full of passion for his home country of South Africa, and the stakes had never been higher. The fight against Whitaker was more than just a contest for a title. It was a testament to the perseverance, the struggle, and the dreams of an entire nation. Dricus du Plessis wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for South Africa, for every person who believed in him, and for every African athlete who aspired to make their mark on the world stage. His victory over Robert Whitaker was nothing short of history-making. The reactions from his family, friends, and supporters back home were overwhelming, with millions of South Africans watching their hero defy the odds to reach the pinnacle of the sport. The weight of the victory wasn't lost on Dricus, who dedicated the achievement to his family and the people of South Africa, who had supported him since the very beginning. His passion for his country and its people was evident in every interview and every fight. It was what drove him. Despite Dricus's success, his rise wasn't without controversy. His comments about being the first UFC champion to live and train in Africa sparked a feud with fellow African champions, most notably Israel Adesanya and Kamaru Usman. The media frenzy surrounding Dricus's words threatened to overshadow his accomplishments, as accusations of racial tension loomed large. However, Dricus was quick to clarify his stance. He wasn't claiming superiority over the African-born champions, but rather emphasizing his desire to represent the continent in a way no one had done before. His message, though misunderstood by some, was rooted in national pride, not racial animosity. This narrative would be tested in the months that followed, as he faced the very fighters who questioned his words inside the octagon. The UFC, always a spectacle of drama and conflict, didn't shy away from turning this tension into a storyline that only added fuel to Dricus's fire. But rather than let the controversy consume him, Dricus focused on what truly mattered, proving himself as a world-class fighter and representing South Africa with every ounce of strength he had. Dricus du Plessis' story isn't just one of athleticism, it's also a reflection of the changing landscape of African MMA. His success is a symbol of how far the continent's fighters have come and how they continue to break barriers on the world stage. The UFC's increasing focus on African talent, particularly in the middleweight division, is a testament to the growing influence of fighters from countries like South Africa, Nigeria, and Cameroon. Dricus's rise serves as an inspiration to young African fighters who, for years, have watched from the sidelines as others dominated the global MMA scene. Now, they have a figure to look up to, someone who shows that with hard work, dedication, and belief, the dream of becoming a world champion is within reach. Dricus is more than just a champion. He's a symbol of the power of perseverance and the changing tides of African sports. Beyond the fighting, Dricus du Plessis' legacy is one of relentless drive and loyalty to his roots. Raised by a hard-working family on a farm in South Africa, Dricus was taught from a young age that hard work and determination were the keys to success. His relationship with his father, who never missed a fight and traveled hours just to see him compete, was the bedrock of his journey. This deep connection to his family, his country, and his people continues to fuel his desire to be the best, not just for himself, but for all who believe in him. Dricus's legacy isn't only about the titles he has won, but the people he has inspired along the way. His rise to UFC prominence is proof that the greatest champions aren't just those who conquer their opponents, but those who inspire others to pursue their own dreams, no matter the obstacles. As we look at the journey of Dricus du Plessis, we're reminded that greatness is not defined by the challenges you face, but by how you overcome them. Dricus's rise to the top of the UFC isn't just a personal victory, it's a victory for every fighter who dares to dream big. For every young athlete in South Africa, Africa, or anywhere in the world who faces adversity, Dricus shows that the dream is always possible. You just have to keep fighting. Dricus du Plessis has bulldozed his way into the UFC, but his story is far from over. As he continues to rise through the ranks, one thing is clear. When you're from a country that has never seen a champion like you, the stakes are always higher. And Dricus isn't just fighting for himself anymore, he's fighting for a continent that is watching, waiting, and ready to celebrate the next UFC champion. Whether he takes home a title or not, his legacy is already cemented, not just as a fighter, but as a symbol of hope for Africa and the world.